Hey y'all, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Vashti Sarah, and you are tuned in to another episode of All the Things, where we literally talk about all the things. So in today's episode, I have a guest by the name of Dana. She is a licensed counselor, specifically in marriage counseling, and she also does sex therapy. But today's episode, we'll be talking about the different stages in marriage and how to fight or work on your marriage, how to save your marriage from quote unquote falling apart. So super fun episode, very encouraging. I share my journey on what postpartum has looked like in the grieving process and how that has influenced my thoughts on marriage. Dana is also very vulnerable on what she's experienced in her personal marriage and going through those stages. So hope you guys enjoy, and definitely do share this episode with a friend. Everyone needs to know about these different stages in marriage, how to look out for it, and how to combat the negative aspects of these stages. So today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dana. She has her own practice. She knows all things about marriage. So Dana, let the listeners know a little bit about who you are, how many years you have been in practice, your specific focus, maybe a little bit about yourself outside of counseling,
Sure.
and then we'll just jump into today's episode. It's a really big topic.
It is. I could go on and on about it. But so I've been back in full-time practice since 2016. I done stuff like early in my marriage before our children, but once my kids came, I did just more volunteer stuff. I worked a lot with the women's ministries, lay counseling, led a few retreats, those sorts of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. And how many years have you been married?
I've been married 30 years.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you've had some experience.
Yeah, I've got 3 kids. The last one just went off to college. So this is our, I learned this term last month. We are open nesters.
Oh.
So that means we're not like kidding ourselves that our kids are totally never, ever coming back home. Yeah.
Are you happy about that, or are you sad about that?
Oh, I'm enjoying it, actually. Yeah. And because I feel like wasn't that the goal?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Even cleave.
Yes. Doesn't mean they abandon us, but yeah.
And which means that you guys did a good job. They're on their own. They're learning how to become individuals outside of, mom and dad.
Exactly. Yeah, to differentiate from us and do their thing.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So let's jump into today's topic. So when I first reached out, we juggled between different topics to talk about in terms of marriage, and something that we're going to focus on today is the 4 stages of marriage, or the stages of marriage. I believe there's 4, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of theories. Some people have 3, some people have 7, some people have, so.
Right.
Yeah.
It's either 3 or 4, but I was curious. I didn't know there were quote unquote stages of marriage. So let's just jump into what are the common misconceptions of marriage.
Well, I think a couple of things is just that it's one of the things that hit me this week in anticipating this question was that marriage is hard. Mm-hmm. We always say it takes work and all those sorts of things. But I look at it as it's just stuff that you should be doing anyway. You should be growing, developing, learning how to get along with your fellow man, learning how to negotiate, through tasks that you have to do together with someone else. It's just that this is a person that sees everything about you. So you can't disguise, or hide behind like you would at work.
Right. Absolutely. They see your rawness, the true side of who you really are.
Yes, they do.
And I tell people often, if you want to know who you really are, get married, because that's how I found out there were so many different things that I thought I was good at. But again, like when you're at work and you're around different people, you put up this facade and you kind of have a little bit more tact and you're not your true self. But in marriage, you let all those walls down, and it's like, wow, there's a beast inside of you that you didn't know about.
You have buttons that get pushed. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So
Yeah.
how have these misconceptions brought marriages to failure and bring struggle inside of marriage?
Well, I think like all human beings do, we protect ourselves from something that we think is going to be difficult
Yeah.
or hard. And so, like when we see failed marriages, maybe our parents had failed marriages. We also see a lot of marriages, I think, this day and age that are just really two individuals living under one roof. They've not really created a marriage,
Yeah.
a team companionship sort of thing. And so even like, separate bank accounts, I'm not advocating how you do your finances, but
Yeah.
I see that a lot in all sorts of people coming in that, like they approach the bills the way that two roommates would. And so it kind of becomes this thing of like, so what's so special about it?
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And again, it goes back to, it seems like it's hard,
Mhm.
the thing that makes it different is the thing that makes it hard.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
that's good that you pointed that out, because we had a couple friends that got married, and that was one of the issues, that the separate bank accounts. And yeah, we were talking to them, and we are like, oh, so when are you guys gonna get a joint account? Oh no, we're gonna keep everything separate. And it's hard not to keep your opinion to yourself, like, especially I wear my emotions on my face. So I was like, oh, okay. And they asked, like, well, what's so important about having a joint account? I was like, well, first of all, the accountability aspect of it. If you have two separate accounts, not saying that you're spying on the other person and they can't buy certain things, but it's that accountability of, here's what our finances look like. I'm not just squandering things. It's not my money, your money. We're in this together. Um, but on that, what is marriage? How do you define marriage?
To me, it's a place where you have a person who joins alongside of you
Mhm.
that increases your influence, is the way I look at it. Um, you like I am far more influential with my children because of who I have as a spouse.
Wow.
Because there are things that I'm more capable of, things that he's more capable of. And so together, like, because I receive influence from him and
Mhm.
he receives influence from me, I'm more influential.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how many times I'm maybe a little unique in that I do use my marriage as an example in both a good and bad way. But I talk about it like, not like this is how you should do it, but I talk about why it worked, like why we worked into how we make it work,
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, and again, and I also can be an example of like, you know, certain things that what are you trying to, do? And from a Christian perspective, what are you doing for the kingdom?
Yep.
You know? And so like for me, I think if I were an individual and everything that I would do for the kingdom would be based and limited to what I could do with my own effort. Like
Yep.
I've been in a helping profession for my whole lifetime. I am never going to make the money that my husband, who's an executive and an engineer, is going to make, and
Right.
and vice versa. Like some women, make more, but but they also want to be influential
Mhm.
by having children and doing those sorts of things, right? And
Yeah.
so it takes two people to create that.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would you say is one of the biggest reasons why marriages fail, or why people view marriage the way they do?
I think it's one
Based
of the
on your
things.
experience and
Yeah.
the counseling appointments that you've had.
I think it's couple of things that are twofold. One is I do think people take too long to decide to get married.
Oh, okay.
And so they're sort of like 2-3 years into a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then they feel like, even though they feel like there's some issues involving the other person,
Mm-hmm.
they've already set up such a world that it's hard to walk off from it.
Wow. Okay.
And so, like, I've had not often, maybe a handful of times, I've had people come in individually, like before getting married, and being really scared about it. And I usually just say, I'm not going to be the person to tell you to do it. I'll
Mm-hmm.
help you walk out of it. I'll help you walk out of it with your head high. You know? But there's this pressure,
Yeah.
and it's a cultural pressure too. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when are you guys going to get married?
Yeah.
When are you going to be able to post on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
whatever that you're engaged, or Instagram, or wherever you do your postings about you developing further in life? Yeah. And then from a Christian perspective, I think I see, because of the push
Mm-hmm.
of, no sex before marriage, all those sorts of things, I see a lot of younger people getting married. And in fact, my daughter, she's my youngest, she's 18. And we've been in this thing of like seeing all these posts about people getting engaged that are like the same age as her, that she's known since kindergarten. And she and I are like, because she's taking it from her perspective, like, oh my God, no, I don't want to. I can't imagine myself doing that. And so, like, I say that because it's sort of like, I'm also a sex therapist. So the other thing I say is, like, pregnancy is not the worst thing that comes from unprepared or unsafe sex.
Right.
And so, like, the heaviness I feel like that we as Christians put on no premarital sex,
Mm-hmm.
we don't consider what we are pushing our young adults into sometimes.
Which is get married to
Get
what's
married.
if you're burning with fire.
Yes.
Go ahead and
Like Paul says, better to get married than to burn.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. I know when my husband and I were dating, we got that pressure, when are you going to get married, or when are you going to engage, and then when we got engaged, when are you going to get married? Everyone wanted to know the date. And then the moment we got married, so when are you guys going to have kids? So it's this constant pressure
Constant. Yeah.
space of life. And with the kids one, my husband finally got fed up, and he's like, if anyone asks me again, I will say, fine, we're going to go have sex right now. And just to make it awesome, yeah, excuse us, we're just going to go right now. But
it only take us 15 minutes. We'll be right back.
Yeah, we'll be right back. We'll keep you posted. But there is this constant pressure to get to the next phase of life. And I do agree with you. In the Christian community, we do a disservice to our young adults. And even if they're not young adults, but we do a disservice to those who are dating. And we put this pressure, this constant pressure to get to the next phase. And we don't realize they have to get to know. There's so many layers in relationships that if we push them, we have them move too fast into a relationship that they probably shouldn't have been in the first place.
Yes. Yes. And sort of also like that myth that, when you get married, all the fun dies.
Yes.
And when
Oh, we got that a lot. We were a year in, and we have people, so how's marriage? Oh, it's fun. We're doing this, doing that. Oh, you're still in the honeymoon phase. Just wait until that's over. And it's so depressing. I'm like, golly, for Christians, y'all should be uplifting us and, encouraging us and praying for us, not, hey, doomsday is going to come soon. Okay.
And it's all,
yep.
Well,
I'm sorry, that's what your marriage looks like. I mean, we have our moments, but that's not saying we're not having fun.
Yeah. And if you're not having fun, that's not because you've been married a long time. It's because of you.
All right, so let's talk about the stages of marriage. How did these stages come about? Where did this theory?
I think it really comes from the idea, like, that people really have, like, a lot of people know the one of Erickson's stages of development for children.
Mhm.
And so it's sort of a way of saying these are the common steps that, as you develop, you would go through. So they kind of picked apart. These are the common things that people that need to have, like development happens. And some of it's because of just the natural, children coming, age coming,
Yeah.
those sorts of things. But then it's also like in Erickson's, what he talks about is like he wants you to master certain things in those stages. And if you don't, his theory is you carry over the thing that you didn't master into your next stage. And so that stage doesn't go as well for you. So late stages of marriage may not go as well for you if you've struggled in the middle stage. I mean, I even remember hearing a pastor preach, thought it was a weird message, but honestly, when I look back on it, was like, he thought there's such a high divorce rate of people getting divorced after their children are gone.
Yeah.
And I think part of that's cultural,
Right.
Like it's not going to be impactful to your family, but he was trying to be encouraging as to how to do that. And so, but some people would say, then it's because you didn't do well at the other stages that you're now getting divorced, kind of thing. Yeah.
I've always heard that your 7th year is the worst year. And I don't know if people over spiritualize it. And it's like, 7 is.
I would agree that they over spiritualize.
Okay. But I do hear like the 7th year is like the hardest year.
Yeah.
Which I told my husband, I was like, I don't want to go into marriage looking forward to this, or not looking forward, but in anticipation for the 7th year and how hard it's going to be. Just want to take every year as it comes, and like we know we'll have moments, but don't look forward to this, to when the kids leave and then it's gonna like anticipation for the worst that will happen.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So,
and what we talk about today will really answer that question as to why 7, that time frame, has a challenge.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All couples go through these stages.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like as a 30-year married person, like I can look at each of them and say, so true.
Wow. So you've been through those stages.
Yes.
Okay. All righty. So let's talk about the first one. Stage 1 is romantic love.
Yes.
Unpack it for me. What is this first stage of romantic love?
Well, it's obviously where the level of attraction is really high.
Okay.
You are both in physically typically good shape. So the physical aspect of attraction is still there. You still are able to look at the other person, and even though they didn't brush their hair and their breath is smelly because you just woke up, you still think they're just as beautiful as they were the other day. There's no you're enamored with being able to spend the time with one another. You feel very emotionally bonded because you've picked this person. I would say it's like one of those other myths is that you feel like you're with your soulmate, kind of like, he gets me.
Yes. Like, how long does this stage last? Is it just, or it depends on the person, I'm assuming?
No, I think it's just because when you look at what the next stage brings, that's what kind of naturally ends the stage. Okay. So like I remember in my first years of marriage, my husband had a job where he could leave, like his day ended around 4:30 or something. And when he came home, he was completely available to me because we had no children.
Yep.
We had a 2-bedroom apartment.
Close quarters.
Yeah, he didn't have any, the level of his responsibility at work, my level of responsibility at work did not impinge on the after 4:30 time frame.
Right.
We could spend all of our resources on us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the second stage we'll go into is disillusionment and distraction, which as you said, it's not a matter of time frame, but whenever distraction comes around, that's when the romantic love kind of shifts.
Right.
And it was like, okay.
And there's even still challenges in romantic love
Uh-huh.
because could be, it's so idealized,
Mm-hmm.
that, and for different people, what is idealized about it is different,
Mm-hmm.
and so then you get into it and it isn't really like that, you
Okay.
know, like a simple thing is, I remember we got so excited about having our first Christmas, no, Thanksgiving meal together. It was just going to be the two of us. And we cooked all day and we put the food on the table and we sat down and we ate it. And then we were tired and we went and took a nap. And we came back and it looked like a mouse had been there because there was just a tiny little spoonful of every little meal that we had idealized, like we get to do our own Thanksgiving, cook our own food. We wore ourselves out and had to eat leftovers for days. So like it's that same kind of thing, like it's build up at the first times for things, and I also think there's unspoken expectations that you don't know about until you're in the same household with each other. A way to work through those things is that you should be having conversations about your likes and your dislikes.
Okay.
I think a lot of times, like, we don't want to fight or argue or all those sorts of things. And so we tend to begin to be silent. Both men and women do. Yeah.
And that's interesting that you say that, because I asked my husband actually 2 days ago, I was like, is it odd for you that I'm so quiet? But I'm naturally a quiet person.
Yeah.
And he told me, he's like, well, I would appreciate if you would voice your opinion a little bit more, or like tell me how you feel. Because he from the outside appearance, he would seem like the quiet one and I would seem like the talker, but it's actually reverse. And he'll talk and talk and talk, and he'll have everything to say, he's very business minded. So he's always constantly going. But I will sit there and I'll be quiet. And he's like, I would like for you to I want to hear more about you. Like, and which was odd to me. I was like, well, you know everything about me already. But it, like you said, as male and females, we kind of just get quiet and we don't say much. And the past couple of days, I've been trying my best, and I will continue to work on that, is talk a little bit more, share. And I always tell him, I was like, well, I don't say anything if I don't have anything to say. That's always my natural response. But he desires communication. He desires
feedback.
You know?
Even if it's just about what he's like, just an assurance of, And I think too, in the same way too, like your family of origin starts, creeping its head in. I mean, I think it starts from dating probably on, depending on your family and things like that. So.
And that's what we talked about too. I was like, well, I've always been quiet. And he was like, well, no, I think it has a lot to do with how you were raised. You were raised to sit and listen. And I mean, phenomenal parents, but we live my culture is a very honoring culture. And you don't talk back. This sounds so harsh. But you don't necessarily have an opinion per se. It's, you just do as you're told. So I brought that attitude or that perspective in dating, in marriage. And slowly we've been breaking that, where my husband's like, no, you have an opinion. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. It's okay to stand firm in your thoughts and belief system. But I've just always known, you honor, don't talk back. If they tell you it's blue, and that's what it is. And it shows in how I respond to things, and it also shows in my quietness. And it's something that I constantly have to break.
Yeah. And you may have, I think some people also too have like underneath, they have a feeling of that how they see or operate in the world. They don't get that it's their family has influenced that. It's not been something that they have chosen.
Yep.
kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so, and then there's also the feeling that our way of doing it is superior to,
Yep.
like my husband is more Midwestern growing up. Had a very Southern upbringing. And
Mhm.
so there's definitely some differences there.
Oh, absolutely. We're not from completely different cultures. There is differences because you grew up completely different than he did. And
Yeah,
the way his mom did things is different than how your mom did things.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
so what brings on disillusionment and distraction? I mean, kids, I'm sure, is one of them, but what
Yes.
can push us into that second stage of marriage?
Well, some of it is that you typically are getting into your careers.
Okay.
Okay. So even if it's not, like even if you're in a part-time job, if you're the wife kind of thing, or even if, like even him like, let's say he's the primary breadwinner, if him getting into his career is a
Mhm.
factor in your relationship kind of thing. And so and when I say that you're getting into your career, you're actually enjoying
Mhm.
your career. You're enjoying what you're getting from it. Um, and so you're putting energy toward it. It's
Mhm.
the job that let's just say you're in your 20s, mid 20s when you get married. Like the job that you have during your mid 20s is usually not as fulfilling as jobs that you have in your 30s.
Right. Mhm.
Okay. Mentally stimulating, all those sorts of things. And then the same thing with, let's say you're a stay at home mom, like, you know, I see some stay at home moms that put some huge efforts into being a stay at home
Yeah.
mom. I mean, keeping their home and being connected to all that. So, yeah. And there becomes like a mindlessness almost
Mhm.
in that.
Wow.
Um, and it also becomes the responsibilities become greater
Yep.
and heavier, and
Mhm.
and you also start having desires for greater responsibilities.
Mhm.
And so whether that's adding more children, whether that's um, buying a home or buying a better home or those sorts of things, like that starts creeping in. I'll never forget, we had our first kid. He was a year and a half old. We were like 3 years married before we had our first kiddo. So we're
Mhm.
now, kind of past the honeymoon. And we ended up we had this uh, coming up to Christmas, and we were just deciding whether to fly back to Montana to see his family with our first kid
Mhm.
or what. And so we figured out that the flights to Montana were super expensive at Christmas time. And we kind of just like, we really don't want to go to Montana and sit around with a bunch of family for
Yeah.
that ticket price. So we ended up scheduling, like we looked around and it was the same price to go to Paris. So we decided that that was our Christmas gift.
Wow.
And my mom took care of our first kid. And it's when I stopped nursing and all this sort of stuff. So we're in our first big normal night in Paris, and we were back at the hotel room. And I'll never forget this because my husband was like, well, I guess this is as good as it's going to get.
Woo!
Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
we're serious, And, but
Well, there's that for honesty.
he was kind of referring to like we had had our first kid, a
Mhm.
year and a half of that. He was in uh, he'd been in the military. This was his first civilian job. It had it was different. And we had bought a house and we had two cars now,
Wow.
So that's what he meant. I guess this is as good as it's going to get. This is just what it's going to be like.
This is my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it kind of like hitting,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
um, I also think one of the hard things is there's hidden contracts that we walk into marriage with.
Okay.
So I'm going to do a typical one.
Okay.
I had a client the other day talked about this. What they saw in their family was the man did all the outside chores and the woman did all the inside chores.
Uh-oh. Okay.
But you don't know you think that.
Right.
Until you ask somebody to help you mop.
Well, my mom did that by herself. Okay.
And they look at you with like, I don't know how to. Like, it's not like it's that hard to learn. Right. But B, I don't do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so we're going to take a break in this week's episode to talk about our sponsor for today. Our sponsor is Every Life Diaper Company. You guys, if you're listening for quite some time now, you are no stranger to this sponsor. We love them. We love their diapers. We love their wipes. We love their vision and mission for life. They are pro-life, they are against abortion, and they do support families. They support women having children. So use my code VASHTI10 for 10% off your first order. That is VASHTI10 for 10% off your first order. That's funny you mentioned that. I didn't view it as a contract. I guess it is. It absolutely is. It's like, well, this is your role, this is my role, and we're just going to keep at that. But our first year in marriage, I grew up very traditional where the woman does everything inside the home. You take care of the cleaning, cooking, et cetera, et cetera. And my husband, or the man, is the sole provider. I mean, I work too. I work a full-time job as well, but he provides and he takes care of the outside stuff. So our first year of marriage went well. I never really complain. I adapt the personality like my mom, where it's just get it done. Don't fuss. Don't make a big deal out of things. My husband's very chill, like not much to complain about. But there were moments where I would find myself coming home from work. I'm super tired. I have to make dinner, do the dishes, do the laundry. After laundry, my husband, I want to be with him, and obviously we want to have sex. And so like all these different things become very overwhelming. And I didn't realize how overwhelming it was until one day I just broke down and I was like, I just need help. I need help. It's a lot. And I get it. You're working. I get it. Your job, he has to be there at 7 a.m. and leaves at 4. But when you come home, you get to check out. I don't. And I work from 9 to 4 and I don't get to check out. I don't get that that privilege. And after having that conversation, he was like, I had no idea. He took it very well, thankfully, because I know other men would be like, well, that's not my job. But he was like, I had no clue. You just handled it with so much grace. And every day you just did it that I didn't realize you needed help. So our second year in marriage, he stepped it up. He now starts the load of laundry. I was like, these are things that would help me out greatly. Just start the load. I will finish it. Clean up after yourself. Don't leave all the dirty dishes in there if you come home and you make dinner. It would help me greatly if I come home to a clean sink and then I get started with dinner. So we communicated with that, but then going back to what you were saying, I didn't realize he had a certain contract in his head. Well, she's doing it. My mom, and I didn't know I had a quote unquote contract in my head too, where it's like, well, this is my responsibility. I have to bear this burden because I saw my mom did it this way. But it doesn't be that way.
Yeah. Like the pressure of if I were a good wife, I would be able to be doing these things. If I were and I find, and again too, I also see differences of the contract of a man being over the household, of like they have a unsaid contract
Yep.
of what they think that means.
Mm-hmm.
And some people think that, like nothing, I don't negotiate. That's
Yep.
what that means,
Mm-hmm.
and so,
Wow.
those sorts of things. Yeah. And or, again, I've seen a lot of like, when I see struggles, I see a lot where they have allowed the guy to know all the responsibilities about the finances
Mm-hmm.
of his name being on everything
Wow.
and her name not being on anything. And then like not realizing that they've just done that out of the habit of like, well, I'm the one that paid the money for it, or I'm the one that, and they don't ever realize the consequences of what they just know that's what, again, it's unspoken. It
Yeah.
may be unspoken to them,
Yeah.
kind of thing, until you break the contract, till
Mm-hmm.
someone attempts to break the contract. And
Yeah.
then it comes up,
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
think it's a matter of the lack of premarital counseling and talking about these issues beforehand? Because these are things that we talked about in premarital counseling, and even the roles. Like in counseling, our pastor asked us, so who will be cooking all the meals? I raised my hand. I was like, that's on me. I know how to cook. I know he doesn't. And who would be cleaning? I raised my hand. I'll be cleaning. Who will be mowing the lawn? He raised his hand. So we made those clarifications in premarital counseling, but in marriage, I think it took obviously it played itself out because I didn't realize, okay, well, I'm also working full time. I having all these different responsibilities. I have these things I do on the side. There's a lot of pressure. But for individuals who don't have premarital counseling, do you think that's why it's so
I
toxic?
mean, I do. I believe in premarital counseling because I believe it brings out some things
Yeah.
that you need to talk about that you may not have thought about or considered, and it also is a good, healthy checkup. I also think that a lot of people are not honest in premarital counseling.
That's true. Yeah.
Like they'll even lie about whether they've had sex or not, and because
Yep.
it's usually in a pastoral type setting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm this about that. I just believe like learning, like if you're going to have conflict, who do you have built in around you to help you?
Mm-hmm.
My husband was always he's always been in some kind of connection with other men that are quality men.
Okay.
And so and it's even my prayer sometimes, like when I don't like how he's behaving, I'll pray, God, send somebody else to tell him he's messing up and not me.
Yeah. For us, it can be nagging or like you're parenting them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't hear it because they're defensive.
Yeah.
But when someone else who doesn't know them, doesn't know them in the way you do,
Right.
says it, it's better in some respects. So I think it's like an ongoing way of protecting your marriage is to be in good counsel, you as a woman and him as a male. That should be an ongoing thing, and that you've not blessed your future marriage by the fact that you went to premarital.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that continuous checkup outside because and true, that is true too, because in premarital counseling, your sole goal is to get that check mark. I did it and I'm ready to get married. Versus in marriage, all the walls come tumbling down and the real unleashes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the important thing in this stage of when the kids come, when your responsibilities change, is you have to be aware that you don't want to start creating a drift.
Okay.
That it turns into a chasm. Okay. So it's natural that there's going to be drifting. Okay. You're not going to be spending every single moment with each other anymore. Right.
Yeah.
You're having to share the
Mm-hmm.
spotlight kind of thing.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure that you're not, messing up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. How do you make sure that you're not uh, drifted so far away that you don't know each other anymore?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that honestly was one of my biggest fears when we found out we were pregnant.
Mm.
I had so many conflicting emotions. I obviously was very scared. I was very, very scared. I was shocked because we didn't know we could get pregnant.
Mm.
Um, we weren't trying.
Okay.
There were all these. My emotions just hit me in a wave when I saw the positive test. My husband immediately kicked into dad mode. Very excited. Started talking to my stomach. I was like, "Hold on, give me a minute." Because I'm processing here what's going like and one of the biggest things that had me cry over and over during pregnancy was I don't want to lose this. I've seen so many people lose their marriage after having a child. I don't want to lose this. And I felt even guilty. And I know I'm new to being a mom, but the first 2 weeks were genuinely the hardest, not because of having a difficult post birth and having to take
Mhm.
her to the ER, but more so just all these thoughts. I don't know if it was the enemy placing thoughts in my head or is just genuine like concern for our marriage, or it could be hormonal or a combination of all of it. But I wept in our bedroom and I told my husband, I was like, Jared, I don't want to lose us. I was like, I hope you hear my heart. I love my daughter. I love that we had a child. But I look at her and a part of me like resents the fact that I'm losing us, our marriage, because of her. And he's like, we're not losing our marriage. I was like, but yes, we are, because I don't get to spend all my time with you again. I have to split my time. My sole job now, and maybe I'm getting it wrong here, but is to take care of this little human being that depends on me, that, like everything, my life revolves around her. And I wept over, not being able to. One of my fears was I was like, well, my body is not the same anymore. We can't be physical for a very long, not a very long time, but for 6 weeks. And even before that, like we took things very slow within the 8th and 9th month. So I was like, what if you get tempted? And he's like, Vashti, you should know me well enough to know that I love you and I'm in this with you. We'll get through it. I'm not dying for sex. Like, and he's like, there's something that releases when you give birth that a man, it immediately clicks and they don't desire that portion anymore. Now that the 6 weeks is coming up, he's like, I'm excited for that. But he's like, I'm with you. Like, you should know that like our marriage isn't just about physical, it's bigger than that. And he's excited to be a dad. But yeah, just having a child has brought on so much perspective as to why marriages struggle. But I think also maybe I brought fear to my own self because I've seen so many marriages struggle.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I would say that you had a grief response
Mhm.
because of an anticipated loss,
Yeah.
which you went into protective mode,
Mhm.
which would be how do I not let like you and then your protective mode went, well, how do I do that?
Yep.
Now I have to like in order to prevent the loss, my daughter has to not be here.
Exactly. Which is awful because I
No,
always wanted to be a mom. But I even told
but
him, I was like, why do I
it's
feel
not
like this?
awful, Vashti. It is the brain's job is its main job. It's an organ. Its main job is to be protective.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it believed it had this feeling based upon, you know, what you just said. I've witnessed other marriages.
Mhm.
And then I have this pressure that I'm to keep him.
Yes.
And it's my job to keep him. Like I'm 100% responsible for whether he stays in this marriage or not.
Exactly.
Which was that an unspoken contract that you walked in with?
Probably. Probably.
Yes. Yeah.
And he even had
So,
to tell me, he's like, which I didn't realize I was showing this on the outward, but
mhm.
one day he told, like, 2 maybe the 4th day in, he looked at me and he's like, "Vashti, you know it's okay to love her, right?" And I lost it. And I was like, "It's just hard for me to love her because in my brain, if I love her, I quit loving him." And I detach from him entirely because I give my all. And he's like, "No, it's okay to love her. It's okay to give your all to her." And
Okay to expand your empire.
exactly. And I needed that. I 1,000,000% needed him to remind me, or I don't even know if it's like giving me permission
Yeah.
because I love him so much and I love what we have. And I kept telling him, I loved us. I loved, before finding out we were pregnant, everything was so fun. Yes, you have your moments, but like I just loved us so much that I was resistant into getting into this stage of marriage,
Yeah.
but it boils back to because I've seen so many marriages fail that I have this pressure to not fail that I didn't realize that I could fail by
Yeah.
putting pressure on myself.
And that's what I see a lot of, like in that drift, it becomes a chasm because, and it's all doing good things, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it's good to have children. It's good to sign them up for ballet. It's
Mhm.
good to, it's okay for both people to be working full-time jobs and
Mhm.
have children also. You just have to have a plan, of how you're going to do it. But
Mhm.
it's not what the difficult is sort of like my husband's point. This is as good as it gets. Like allowing those things to be the things that you're excelling at,
Yeah.
running the kids to this, picking people up from school, everybody's getting good grades, that becomes the priority. And then you've lost the basically the reason why God pulled you together in the first place,
Mhm.
so you're just accomplishing things that
Wow.
are really only of worth and value in this world,
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
know and you've forgotten about the relationship. You forget about, so you have to have firm boundaries,
Mhm.
um, there's a little formula for keeping intimacy,
Mhm.
which is keeping yourself emotionally attracted and spiritually attracted
Mhm.
during this time frame, um, working on connecting with your spouse at least 15 minutes every day where you're sharing emotionally, sharing spiritually, sharing physically kind of
Mhm.
thing. Um, and that by physically, I said 15 minutes. I don't mean sex.
Right.
I,
Yeah.
like, I mean, you could, sorry, I don't mean vaginal penetrative sex. But I mean kissing,
Yeah.
hugging,
Holding hands.
touching shoulders, sitting next to each other on the couch instead of one of you on one corner and one of you on this corner,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know, um, making an evening each week that it's just the two of you going for
Mhm.
a walk. And I'm not saying you have to plan a date and get a babysitter, but taking a shower together in that evening, taking a bath together, any of those sorts of things. No demands, not like I'm not stating have sex every week, it'll change your marriage. Okay. But
Don't put in and schedule that.
yeah, although it's not a bad thing
Yeah.
because the idea is just like anything. Like if you schedule that you're going to exercise, you're more likely to exercise,
True. Mhm.
so
Yeah.
you're more likely to figure out a way how you're going to do it. Your brain's already thinking about it,
Yeah.
and that helps get you there.
Mhm.
One day a quarter, go do something fun, irresponsible, where you don't have something, like
Yeah.
weighing on you. Yeah.
Mhm.
Fun is so crucial at this
Yeah.
stage.
And what about stage 3?
Stage 3 is sort of comfortable
Okay.
kind of thing. It's getting you're adjusting, you're resigning sort of to this is what this is, like my body's changing,
Mhm.
my abilities of what I used to be is starting to change a little bit. You're also limited by, like I can only go, we can't do the things like when we were younger and be frivolous about our time and our money. And we kind of resign ourselves to that. I think that this is often where, like, people talk about this is sort of where affairs tend to happen
Okay.
because you've kind of had the drift already. And this
Mhm.
is back to whether you're, like if you didn't handle the drift,
Yeah.
then there's no intimacy emotionally. There's no intimacy physically, less so. And you've resigned yourself to that. Well, this is how old I am. This is how old you are. It's okay to just go out to eat and call it like
Yeah. We
we,
connected.
we connected,
Mhm.
um, I'm not taking care of myself anymore because all these other responsibilities, I'm more willing to caretake them than I
Yeah.
am to caretake myself,
Right. Mhm.
So then health stuff starts coming in, my knees, I can't go to Kathmandu with you like you've always wanted to do, go see that or something because
Mhm.
my knees won't allow it.
Is it settling or is it giving up or is it like what causes
It's
us to get to this?
again, if you had the drift,
Uh-huh.
then you kind of like have this internal contract
Mhm.
that the priority is your work and your children
Okay.
and getting them to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
And so then you've forgotten about self,
Mhm.
caretaking of self, which that's to me what self-care is. It's
Mhm.
just caretaking. And then so then now you're paying the price.
Mhm.
And then but you're resigned in that.
Okay.
So um you just you just hand yourself over to it.
Wow.
So it's not it's complacency, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But back to my husband, this is as good as it gets. It becomes this is good enough.
Ah. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
this is good enough. And there are some real challenges during this stage because you can even begin to lose the good enough.
Wow.
So, late stage marriage stuff. So, I've had this all the last 3 years. This has been a challenge for us.
Mhm.
Okay. COVID happened. My husband, they had layoffs with his
Mhm.
job. He got laid off. We started a business that took a huge amount of his time. My brother's health began to deteriorate.
Oh.
He died last year.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
was my mom's health then deteriorated. She died in December. My kids were going to college or graduating for college or moving out. I don't know how many people we moved in and out of apartments in the last 3 years.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's a lot.
Yes.
And so can you imagine if we had had good enough and like for months on end, the highlight was, oh, yay, nobody was in the hospital this weekend. you know,
Yeah.
what can we go do?
Right.
My mind was totally pulled toward the caretaking of
Yeah.
the issues with my brother, the issues with my mom, and my dad, even. There's
Yeah.
that. I had 3 people deteriorating on me,
Mm.
you know? So
Yeah.
then, like, what does he do?
Yeah.
The kind thing is to wait that out.
Yep.
But if to wait it out for what? So we can watch British Bake Off every night?
Yeah. Yeah. And how long does he let you
Yeah.
wait it out?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Is
Yeah.
this usually the time where people kind of just pull away from each other even more?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty.
And so that's when, again, the pastor who talked about people getting divorced after their kids move out, because their whole marriage is about tending to these children,
Mm-hmm.
pulling, and then they look at each other and she wants to do this with their extra time and he wants to do this. And it's not this, it's not the same thing, one. And two, it doesn't even include each other.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. So then why are we married?
Exactly. Wow. So would you say, because the way I'm thinking about it is, it's not you go into stage 1, then stage 2, stage 3. You can jump between these stages as the seasons of your life change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's usually what's happening around you. And then so like careers naturally start to change, when you've been working for 30 years at this point.
Yeah.
You're in your 50s, you start thinking about retirement, what we're going to do later, finances. Your parents naturally get old and start dying.
Mm-hmm.
Your kids naturally begin to move on.
Mm-hmm.
All those sorts of things.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So what can couples do in these stages what can they do in these stages to fight not getting to the point where they call it quits and they walk away?
I think a lot of it is that you have to you have to acknowledge that they're there,
Mm-hmm.
and vocalize, because we focus, like when I say affairs,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about a physical or an emotional affair,
Mm-hmm.
but we betray each other our whole marriage. So what we do is we choose not to go toward that person.
Okay.
When they need us, we choose our child.
Wow.
We choose our work.
Mm-hmm.
We choose getting on our phone, watching the next show in our series. And then the other person needs us.
Yeah.
And we walk off from that because we choose self.
Yeah.
So anytime I have infidelity clients, I mainly I take the level of, like that this person betrayed the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, you both have been probably being betraying each other. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you have to talk into that,
Mm-hmm.
So there's been times in my marriage where I've been too focused on child care, taking care of those sorts of things. And so that's all I would see him as, is someone just to help me do all this stuff. And I did not see him as an individual I was very focused on being a good wife and a good Christian, and I also had my mother was emotionally needy. And so I did not realize that they were taking me away from my family.
Yeah.
My first family,
Yeah.
And so I had to grow into understanding that. We didn't live near my family when we first got married, so it wasn't an issue.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
then it became an issue when we moved back closer.
Yeah.
So I had to one of the things is making boundaries.
Yep.
I had to do something different in that. he worked hard. He worked a lot. And he got deployed 2 times because he was a Navy reservist, even though he left active duty. So
Wow.
he got deployed twice. All those things factored into, our lives. And we had to come to grips with, it came to a point where we said, the benefits of you being in the reserves are not worth you staying longer.
Wow.
Even though it was an identity of our family, us being a Navy family is a huge identity.
Yes.
For us. So you have to recognize you can't get so comfortable that you don't think that any of this is bothering the other person, or that what you're doing has no impact.
Wow.
So you have to you have to be responsible. You have the ability to respond. That's just what that word means.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can't be selfish.
No. No.
So should you fight for all marriages?
No.
Okay. But from a Christian perspective, does that response change, or that answer change?
There's a great therapist that's written a lot of good stuff on emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, and we tend to emphasize physical abuse and my favorite thing she says is that we should never submit to sin.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And so I've noticed in my own relationships with other people, and I've seen it in marriages too, if this other person is the person that you find yourself most likely to sin, you're in trouble. Your walk with God's in trouble.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that, if you're having to lie to protect yourself from the other person's anger, resentment, isolation of you, if you're having to stop what is good and healthy for you, if you're having to do that in order to keep your marriage, would God really have you sin to keep your marriage?
But some would say, well, you just pray for him, or you just pray for her.
Okay. You could continue to pray for someone and not be married to them.
That's true. That's true.
And what I frequently say, and it may be a controversial thing to say, but anytime someone says, I'm thinking about getting divorced, I'll say, go ahead and try. Because it is very hard to divorce somebody. Wow. And if you're wrong, it is so easy to get married again.
Wow. Wow. Huh.
Because it takes that. It's the same thing I did with the one that said, I don't want to get married. Don't. Take away the pressure of what decision you're supposed to arrive at. And actually start doing the stuff. Start saying, I don't accept the way you're treating me. I can't have you do this.
Yeah. And that's not being bossy.
No.
That's protecting and saving your marriage.
Yeah.
So at what point should you, or not at what point, when do you fight for your marriage?
I think you're always fighting to keep, maybe I don't like the word fight. You should always be working to stay.
There we go.
In your relationship and to put it primary, because it outlasts your relationship with your children. It outlasts the length of time usually that you've been you've been with your parents even, you know, your spouse is the person that you will spend the most time with in your entire life.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why it takes priority.
Yep.
Okay. And back to the, you know, it makes you a bigger influence for God's kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it should take priority. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you should put it on the top.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that you have boundaries
Yep.
on how you behave toward these other things that take up your time and influence.
Correct.
Okay. Because yeah, like we said at the beginning, the goal is for these kids to do it themselves.
Yep.
Naturally, your parents are going to die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your job's going to go away. You're going to retire one day.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to want you to work anymore. You may find different kind of work,
Right.
you know, but it changes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like, so you're supposed to always be working toward that.
Mm-hmm.
You should always want, if your spouse has sinned against you, you would always want that person to be made whole.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So that would always be your desire.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. And so often what I do is that I say, like, it's this thing to me, like, if you waiting on the other person to be made whole is still allows you to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then okay. Right.
Yeah.
But what I frequently see is that if someone's in a place of like addiction or even mental health or even just good pure sinfulness,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and selfishness, when you start saying, like, I have boundaries on how that affects me.
Yeah.
If they don't have boundaries, they normally don't respond by doing better.
Right. Yeah.
It becomes more obvious where they're at. And it's just a classic thing is that if you don't have boundaries, then you're basically enabling the sin to bloom and to continue.
Wow.
That's what enabling is.
Yes.
You're allowing it to grow and develop, and you're protecting them from their own sin.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I have done some special sorts of things where I'm in the state of Texas, and so there's no legal recognition of separation.
Yeah.
There's like some agreement, contractual paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have begun to do when I offer to assist with people having what I call a therapeutic separation.
Okay.
So they have to agree to both be doing things individually. And then we have these checkup times, which are couple sessions where, like, well, we're going to be separated for another 7 days or another 10 days. And then we'll have a session.
Separated from the home as well.
Yes.
Okay. Physically separated from each other.
Physically separated.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen this work?
Yeah, it's worked. Usually people that deal with addictions use this. And what happens is because it's a way of not letting the person with the addiction continue to drain the relationship.
Yeah.
You know, drain it with resources, drain it with, you know, some other sorts of things, right? You know, so when you're separated therapeutically, you're not going to go rescue the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's sort of like a thing of like, are you willing to take acknowledgement of the role that you play?
Mm-hmm.
And what have you, you know, what are you going to do to work on that? And here's your opportunity, because you're not fighting and you're not wasting your breath on trying to persuade the other one that they're wrong and that they need to do all the work, and you're so innocent.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So as we're wrapping this up here, what would you say would be 3 tips for marriages? The listener right now that is either in stage 1, 2, or 3, what would be 3 tips for their marriage?
Kind of that little thing of working on your intimacy.
Okay.
being connected. Like I think of that as the reason why my husband and I are so enjoy each other 30 years later is because we have so many inside jokes. We have so many like
You know each other.
each other because we've shared ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah. So we know each other and we trust each other. We've made deposits of trust.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't we've consistently shown up and been there for one another.
Yeah.
And I've learned how to love a person. Not that I have felt loved, but I have learned to love another person. I purposely try to learn to love another person.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the sorts of things I would, work on.
Yeah.
And then if you put it concretely, I know a lot of people will say, pray together, read your Bible together.
Yeah.
But to me, that's building intimacy. Because I've been a part of people doing a Bible study where all I did was listen to somebody else read scripture, and that wasn't anything.
Right.
I didn't build intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to build intimacy. Praying together should be it's a building of intimacy.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever viewed it that way, but you're right, because you're being vulnerable with each other. And especially spiritually, that type of vulnerability is intimacy. Like I fall more in love with my husband when we pray together or when we read the word together. And that's separate from other ways of keeping your marriage lively.
I'm able to say out loud to God what I'm thankful for in my husband, which is a way of me building up his identity of who he is and what he means for me and for our family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Dana. I love talking about marriage. I love talking about relationships, and I hope to have you back on. You've mentioned you're a sex therapist, and have an episode on that and talk about the importance of sex and how to cultivate that in marriage. But
and also even how to cultivate a healthy aspect of it with your children.
Oh, let's talk about that. Absolutely. I grew up and I don't think I ever had the sex talk ever. So that was just the idea of sex was very cringy. We never talked about it until now. My husband and I, we are very open, and we talked about it, before marriage and what our expectations are. So even breaking down those walls, because I thought, oh, we shouldn't be talking about that. We're not married yet. But we were encouraged, hey, talk about what your expectations are. Don't just go into marriage blinded. Yep. So, but phenomenal conversation today. And I hope to have you back and maybe talk more about marriage and divorce and what that looks like. But I
enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode on all things stages of marriage. We have more episodes coming out on marriage. I love talking about relationships, how to save your marriage, signs to look out for, red flags to look out for. So tune into the upcoming episodes, and I will see y'all next Wednesday.